Hello, everyone. We will go ahead and get started. If I could ask our lovely panelists to turn on their videos so everyone can see you. And just so everyone knows, I'm Carrie Curry. I am the historical coordinator at the Burwell School Historic Site. And I do want to thank you for joining us today for Women Experience the Vote, Empowerment in Politics. This program is part of our year-long celebration for the 100th anniversary of the 19th Amendment, giving women across the country the right to vote. The state of North Carolina entitled their celebration, She Changed the World. And today we have with us three women who are changing the world in many ways, including on the local level. And we're super excited to hear more from these ladies who are a lot of fun and very wonderful. But before we begin, I just want to tell everybody about our format for today. And I do want to give you a little bit of background on Hillsborough and Orange County just to put it all in perspective. So after I introduce our panelists, they will have the opportunity to respond to a few questions about their personal experience in voting and politics. And then we will have a time to take questions from our participants. So at any time during the program, feel free to put a question in the question and answer, and we will get to that at the end. So each of our panelists serve in an elective capacity, either in the town of Hillsborough or in Orange County. And I am going to share my screen and show you just a few statistics. If I can get it to move. There we go. So just to put it all in perspective, according to the census data from July 2019, Orange County had a total population of 148,476 people, and 53% of that was female. In Hillsborough, part of that 148, the population was 7,161 and 55% female. Orange County also has two school systems, the Chapel Hill Carrboro school system and the Orange County school system, which serves all the kiddos north of Chapel Hill and includes Hillsborough. So while the statistics are interesting and helpful for perspective, they really don't speak to the individual needs of our county and our town. And to learn all that, you really have to meet people on a personal level. And that is something that each of the three ladies with us today have done. So I'm very happy to introduce you to our panelists, and I am going in alphabetical order. First off, we have Hillary McKenzie. She is the chair of the Orange County School Board. She grew up in Chapel Hill, attended Appalachian State University, and received a degree in professional writing in 2005. She later graduated from the Body Therapy Institute in 2009 as a massage and bodywork therapist. She served as a guardian ad litem, representing and advocating for the needs of children in the Orange County foster care system. She lives in Orange County with her partner, Mike, and their two children who are in the Orange County school system. And she was elected to the Orange County School Board in 2018 and became chair in 2020. The next panelist is Renee Price, the vice chair of the Orange County Board of Commissioners. She was born and raised in Rochester, New York, and earned a BA degree from Tufts University in Urban Affairs and went on to earn a Master of Regional Planning from Cornell. She also studied at Colgate Rochester Divinity School in the Master of Arts program. After years of working in neighborhood revitalization, land planning, and historic preservation in New York, she moved in 1990 to Orange County and became active in sustainable agriculture. Renee has been involved in numerous community activities, including serving as one of the Burwell School Historic Site Commissioners with the Historic Hillsborough Commission. And in 2012, she was elected to the Orange County Board of Commissioners. She is running unopposed this November in the election, and she lives just outside of Hillsborough with her partner, Michael, and was recently named the North Carolina County Commissioner of the Year. Our last panelist is Jenn Weaver, who is the mayor of Hillsborough. She grew up in Charlotte and attended Prescott College in Arizona. She received her master's degree in political science from UNC Chapel Hill and worked as a public policy researcher for the program on public life located in the journalism school at UNC, and then later at Clean Water for North Carolina as a water justice researcher. Jenn lives in Hillsborough with her husband and 2 children. She was a member of the Hillsborough Board of Commissioners for 6 years and served as mayor pro temp before making history in 2019 when she became the first female mayor of Hillsborough. And we are very excited about that. So, ladies, I'll go ahead and let you unmute yourselves if you wish. And thank you for joining us. So now that we know more about you, I'd like to just learn a little bit more about your time in public service. So I'm going to do a round robin and ask you to respond. And we're going to start with Renee. And Renee, would you share with us what first made you interested in running for public office?
Well, first of all, I do want to say thank you for inviting me to this fantastic panel, and hello to everyone that's joining us in this Zoom meeting. It was kind of interesting because I never intended to get into politics. One reason I left New York was to get out of politics, and I was successful for about 20 or so years. But over time, I wanted to have a more definitive role in governmental decisions, the policies, the projects, and the programs that were affecting my life and the life of people that were around me. I already had a concern and appreciation for the women, men, and children in Orange County, just as I've done, in communities wherever I've lived. And I was concerned about our environment, where we live, where we work, and really, really concerned about sustainable living and sustainability in general and making the world a better place. When I was young, I thought I was going to change, got out of college, I thought I was going to change the world. I realized that the world is too big for that. So, I try to make the best of what's around me. And now that I've been in public office for a while, 8 years, I can look back and I see that being an elected official is in a way a calling, particularly in North Carolina, because you don't do it for pay. The pay is quite low, but the rewards are high. When you know that you're doing something that's making life better for other people, or at least making that attempt to make life, more desirable, and when you know that people appreciate what you're doing.
Thank you. I love that passion. And I would say that you have changed the world. All our little changes make a difference. Jenn, will you share with us what drew you to run for public office?
Sure, and I'll follow Renee's lead and just say thank you for inviting us to do this panel. It's an honor to be here, especially alongside such excellent public servants as Renee Price and Hillary McKenzie. I'm really glad to be serving alongside you all in this community at the same time. So I think this is a fairly common story for many women who end up running for office, is that I was asked to run. It was in the summer of 2013. My husband and I had gotten, and then it ends up wrapping up the whole family, we were really involved in the Moral Monday movement that was in full swing, driving to Raleigh once a week for these gatherings. And one of the messages there is that if you want to create change, we need more folks to run for office. Because from our standpoint, some of the policies that were being passed were really damaging to our communities. And then at the same time, 2 longtime members of the Hillsborough Board of Commissioners had decided not to run for re-election. And so, people start thinking, well, who is going to run? And I had a handful of people in the community ask me if I would consider it. I had been serving on a volunteer board in Hillsborough for several years. And I see that my mom is on the call. Also, Kathy Chapman is on this webinar, who knows my mom from way back. I was raised in a household where getting involved in local politics was just something that you did. And so I grew up stuffing envelopes and answering phone calls when I didn't really want to answer phone calls, but somebody needed to in the volunteer central. So I really believe that local politics is a place for change making, and we are making these decisions that have an impact on people's everyday lives in a way that people can really have an immediate feel. And I think that's about it.
That is great. I love that, change making. I like the idea of that being what you guys are really focused on. So Hillary, using that segue, why don't you tell us what led you to seek public office?
Sure. So like Renee and Jen, thank you so much for inviting me to be here. I will tell you, it is very humbling to be asked to serve on a panel with people who I have admired for years. So I am here, but having a little fangirl moment being here with people who I respect so much. So thanks. As far as running for office, in late 2016, I met a local mom who shared her story about her daughter encountering the Confederate flag at Orange High School and her experience interacting with the school district and the board around that issue and around racism more generally. And so I began to attend school board meetings with this mom in solidarity and with many other folks. And we began what turned into a 9-month campaign requesting that hate symbols be banned from the district dress code for students. As the group continued to organize and Hate Free Schools Coalition was born, my network in the community expanded greatly. And I started hearing firsthand experiences of racism in our public schools directly from students. This group of parents and students consistently filled auditoriums to share our thoughts about the dress code. Students were basically begging for the school board's protection as racial tensions were rising after Trump was elected. And then on the Monday meeting in August, after Heather Heyer was murdered in Charlottesville under Nazi and Confederate flags, the school board finally decided to ban those hate symbols from the student dress code. So I continued to work with Hate Free Schools after the ban was made. And I signed up for racial equity workshops, read books about racism in public education, and started engaging with the community in ways that I really hadn't done before. And so when school board elections came around the following spring, I kind of had a similar experience to what Jen was talking about, and several people asked me if I would consider running. So I decided to run with a dedicated focus on disrupting oppressive systems in the school district. But I also have two kids who are in the school district and have advocated for children in the community as a guardian ad litem. So it felt a little bit like a natural step for me, even though it hadn't been something that was a long-term goal. But I'm a big believer in just simply taking the next right step in life, and it just felt right in the moment.
That is wonderful. I love how your passion for making that change sort of led you to this new chapter where you could really make a difference. So thank you for that. And thank you all. I love hearing the stories of how you guys got involved. And now I'm sort of curious, what were the obstacles that you faced, or were there obstacles that you faced, particularly thinking as women going into politics? So when you started to run, if you could kind of touch on that. And Jen, would you start us off with that question?
Carrie, could you just repeat that? You cut out and
So
froze
sorry,
for a moment.
guys.
It's okay.
The weather isn't helping with the internet today. My question was, what obstacles, if any, did you each face when you decided to run for office? And were any of those obstacles related to being female?
I would say that the obstacles I faced, the community, the Hillsborough community, I didn't experience any kind of widespread aversion to women running in public office. I mean, you know, Evelyn Lloyd and Frances Dancy, you know, Frances was one of the women one of the people who had chosen not to run, you know, they'd been on the Hillsborough Town Board serving very well for a long time. And so I didn't really see that in his example as an obstacle in and of itself. I think one of the things that I did notice when I was canvassing, so just knocking door to door, is that I had lots of people ask me in a way I didn't necessarily appreciate, do you understand that this is going to take, do you have, when they found out I had small children, because of course at the time they were much smaller, do you really understand how much time this is going to take? It's going to take, are you ready to spend nights away from your kids? And at times it came from people who it surprised me that it was being come from. And I think that was usually meant well, but at the same time, I was thinking to myself, I don't think that the men running for office are getting asked this question, men with children, and I have, as I've talked to other men who have run for office, they have certainly verified that this is not something that they usually get asked about. I also had a couple of places knocking on doors ask me, well, why are you running for town board? Why aren't you running for the school board? Which I found to be a very interesting question that I wasn't prepared for. And I want to be really clear that I do not think that the school board, especially right now in a pandemic with the decision that they're making, is any kind of lesser thing. I think it was just because I was a woman and they're thinking, well, schools have to do with children, women have to do with children, so that must be the natural. Found that to be an odd question. So, and all that said, I am also kind of the primary parent in our household. And so there is a personal, I am, away from home more than I would like. But I have a great partner in my spouse, but I think that, I really aim to frame that. And that is something that any parent of any gender running for office needs to think through.
Absolutely. Hillary, would you like to follow up on that with what obstacles you had?
Sure. So the biggest obstacle when I was running was that I made the decision to run a couple of days before filing opened up. So I'll just say, as a blanket statement, I do not recommend making that decision and then scrambling to throw a campaign together. It was super stressful. But that being said, I was quite fortunate to have a lot of community support to do so quickly. And while it was stressful to learn how to run for office while I was already running, I was able to pull it together with the help of an amazing team. But what I want to emphasize on this topic was how relatively straightforward it was for me to run, because I'm a middle-class, college-educated white woman. I have seen others run for office locally with a completely different experience, including racist smear campaigns. I have had colleagues of color asked to prove their credentials in ways that mine have never been questioned. I personally believe that our boardrooms and elected bodies need more diversity sort of across the board: race, socioeconomic status, life experience, age, genders, everything. But if that's indeed something we value as a community, we really have to open our minds about what we look for in candidates and what we consider the appropriate credentials for our elected officials. We can't use the same list of qualifications that excludes so many people who have valuable voices and life experiences to bring to the space where policies are created.
I'm really glad you made that point about how you didn't have struggles that others may have had. And Jenn bringing up the question that you get as a mother, I think that one really hit me as well. That, are you prepared to step away from your children to do this? It gives you a lot to think about. Renee, could you tell us some of your experience and any obstacles that you may have faced?
Oh, sure. Well, I had no children responsibilities, so I'm going to differ from Hillary and Jenn. But I would say one of the things that I had to deal with, now mind you, I ran in 2010 and lost, and then ran again. I would say the first time I was very shy. There's still some shyness about me, but I was shy, and I think the hardest thing was raising money and asking people to support me in my campaign. I mean, I had done it for other friends. I helped a friend of mine get elected to the, New York General Assembly. No problem there. And helping other people, once, when I got to North Carolina, but to make that, do that call time to raise money for the campaign, that was difficult for me. And I've talked to other women, particularly women of color, that have had that difficulty as well, because we don't have those automatic networks of people with money that want to give you money, that money that just kind of circulates amongst your friends. So that was something I had to get used to, and just to go on out there and ask, because people actually do want to give. I was surprised, but they do. I would say also trying to get, those networks, I lack some of those traditional networks that people have when they're running, because as my colleagues have stated, they had children. So, I in fact, I listened to one, I think it was Hongben, that said, what helped her to run was, she knew a lot of parents. And so, you have all those friends, or school related. Then when I ran against, when Earl McKee and I ran against each other, I had to realize that, he is from here generations back. So he had gone to high school with so many people. There were college alumni and all of those kind of supporters I lacked, and no major affiliations like that, because, I'm a transplant. But I did have a background by being on numerous advisory boards and commissions, and my involvement, particularly in the campaign against Elizabeth Brady road bypass. And so my name was getting out there. And I had been involved in a lot of the county commissions and advisory boards. Then I would say that I think, again, because, lacking those networks that a lot of people would have, those kind of automatic networks, it was like finding a treasurer and organizing a team in the midst of, when I ran in 2012, in the midst of, everybody's focused on the presidential election. This is when Obama was running for re-election. So I had to deal with that. But we made it. I did have a good team, and Kathy Chapman, and she's been my right arm in my elections. Tells me what to do, where I need to be, says, come on, let's go walking. And then I would say that the final thing is time management. The questionnaires. One year, I think I filled out 13 questionnaires, and then there were forms on top of that. So that, trying to manage your time so that you're not totally exhausted before election day can be a challenge. And the final thing that I would say is, even though I didn't get questions asked, such as, why aren't you home with your children? Some people did doubt when I ran the second time that I would be able to defeat an incumbent white male who was also an attorney in Hillsborough. And I think people doubted, I know people doubted my ability. In fact, it took a lot of people by surprise when they finally saw the results, because I won.
Well, and we are thrilled that you did and to have you here today. And I want to diverge just a minute before we go on to our next question, because you brought something up that I'm curious to have Jenn and Hillary chime in on as well. And that's about, you spoke to other women who had a hard time asking for money. And I feel like that, to me, speaks to this idea of how women should be and the things that are and are not okay for women to do. And Jenn and Hillary, did you have any experience, either personally or with other individuals that you know, in kind of having that trepidation of going out and saying, this is something that I want, this is something that I know I can be good at, now I need your financial support?
Should I go first, Jenn?
Go ahead.
So I have a background in sales, so I'm kind of used to asking people for money, and I wouldn't say it's a point of discomfort for me. I mean, I think when you're asking for it for yourself, it's a little bit different. Like, I wasn't selling a product. You're kind of like asking for people to pledge money because they believe in you, and you have to really put your ego aside to and have confidence in what you can offer the community to make that request. And I would say, it took me a minute to just sort of wrap my head around that, because it's a lot different than, the sales that I have done in the past. But I would say generally I have encountered sexism and gender stereotypes throughout this process in a lot of different ways, even being a board member. But mostly I just try to ignore it and just keep pushing through.
That's great. Jenn, how about you?
Well, there is a basic truth to the fact that running for elected office in the town of Hillsborough is really different from running for county commissioner or school board, because it is just a much smaller pool. It does not cost as much money. So my election for mayor and my second and my re-election on the board of commissioners, those were unopposed. So I didn't really have to do anything as far as fundraising went. But when I first ran, you can run an effective campaign in the town of Hillsborough for about $2,000. And so this really gets back to one of the things that Hillary brought up, which is that really we could have self-financed that campaign ourselves. And so that is just a huge obstacle already that we did not have to, I'm saying we, because this is a kind of a household effort. Right. We did not have to overcome. That wasn't something that we thought that we were, thinking through of should I, shouldn't I? That said, you still want to ask people to support your campaign, because I think it is, I'm a democracy nerd. I think it's best when, you've got, it's sort of the way things work, is this donation is a symbol of I support you, I support your candidacy. And so I'm not a big fan of purely self-financed campaigns. I don't think that is the good that sometimes it's painted as. So I will also say I did not enjoy that, but it was also not as big of a deal because there wasn't as much that had to be raised.
Right. Well, and speaking of those who support you and who help you, I would love to hear from you guys if you had mentors. All three have mentioned some folks who have helped out. And it would be great to just know who those people were and kind of what kind of support you got from them. So let's see, where are we? Hillary, you get to start this one off.
Great. So I love that you're asking me this question, because like I've said several times already, I have long admired Commissioner Price and Mayor Weaver. Their examples and dedication to our community certainly inspired me to run for office. I actually remember talking to Jenn on the phone the day I officially decided to run and hanging up and being like, dang, I can't back out now because I've told Jenn I'm running. There are so many folks who I have looked up to in our community who are doing a million small and miraculous things. We're so fortunate in Orange County to have tons of community organizations and groups who are dedicated to serving the people who live here. And all of those efforts have inspired me along the way. I've learned to move the needle. We need folks who are willing to work on the inside of these organizations, and we also need folks who are on the outside pushing elected bodies along. Both aspects of democracy are vitally important to the progress that I hope we continue making. So I also have to specifically mention LaTondra Strong here and the many friends and community members of color who have helped me understand the experience of our Black, Brown, and Indigenous community in Hillsborough. The honesty and grace that they have offered me as a white woman learning about racism and how to be an ally has been life-changing, not just as a school board member, but for being an anti-racist community member, raising children during a national reckoning around race, and for learning how to own the mistakes I make and inevitably will make, and to always strive to do better and learn more. And then finally, I have to mention the Burwell School's own Brenda Stevens, who has mentored me through the process of becoming a school board member. The historical knowledge about Orange County schools and the lived experiences she brings to the table have helped shape my effectiveness as a school board member and guided me through this time of my life. I lovingly call her my school board mama, and she keeps me in line and brings me along in so many ways.
That's great. Hearing about these folks, it's just so encouraging to hear that you've had that level of support. Jenn, can you share your experiences?
Sure. Well, when I think about, who my mentors are and who have given me that assist, part of it is just kind of standing on the shoulders of everybody who came before me, some who I have known, the vast majority who I have not known, who laid the groundwork for whatever good I try to do in my life. And in some of those, our ancestors where I have been given great advice about thinking that of trying to repair, what my ancestors did not do so well. And, in particular, I can name my grandmother Weaver, my dad's mom, who was a single mom, in Alabama in a time where that was just not very common. And my own mother, and who I've mentioned before, and I could go on and on about, my granny, her mom, who didn't have more than a 7th grade education. If she were still alive, she would have turned 100 this summer. But, who all, showed leadership in ways that weren't necessarily open, or were, when other doors were closed, they were able to lay the pathway in whatever ways that they could. And then also, locally, to get real specific, when I did decide to run, Betty Eidner, someone told me, you got to talk to Betty Eidner. So I emailed Betty, and she was super lovely and generous, and gave me a long list of people that I should talk to, places I should go in the community. And to have that long knowledge of Hillsborough was extremely helpful. And then just to be a super nerd, because that is how I am. I grew up admiring Shirley Chisholm, admiring Geraldine Ferraro. I mean, I don't know, when Geraldine Ferraro was on the ticket as vice president, I don't know how many, I think I was in 3rd grade, maybe. I did the math the other day, but now I've messed it up. Like how many third graders were really on the Geraldine Ferraro train? I don't know. But so I'm so appreciative of those examples of women in public office that laid the pathway.
Fantastic. And I have to say, I share one of your mentors with Miss Betty Eidner. She has been a mentor for me at the Burwell School. Her knowledge extends. And I love the idea of you as a young girl being so excited about a woman in a high political office. I think it's fairly exciting for a lot of young girls today to be seeing that happening right now, having someone run for that. So Miss Renee, can you please let us know who your mentors were and how that impacted you?
Okay, well, I'm not going back to the 3rd grade. That's too far. Although I do remember my teachers. Well, I would say, to be direct, there were elected officials, either that some are still in office and some have retired. When I first began to think about running for office, or people were saying you should run for office, and it's like why? And then they said, well, go talk to so and so. So people like Ellie Kinnaird was very helpful. She sat down with me and talked with me. And I talked to Jay Bryan, because we both were running for office at the same time. He was running for judge and I was running for commissioner, and we had served on the planning board together, but he had a lot of contacts. And I think it's important to know, the territory. And I also spoke with Valerie Fashee and a lot of other people in Hillsborough. I can think of Eric Hallman and Tom Stevens, just a lot of people. And Brenda, I probably talked to you too, I'm not sure. But just to get an idea of the lay of the land, so to speak, because I wasn't from here, and I knew that, but I also knew that there were a lot of other people that weren't from here also. So I was trying to bridge those gaps. But they were very helpful in letting me know, because it's a little different. I mean, Jenn has Hillsborough, and you can get to know Hillsborough, I think, a little faster since it's small than the rest of Orange County. And even with the school board, you're kind of focused on school and community, but you have a direct focus on school. With commissioner, that there's so many, I mean, you go from school funding to solid waste to recycling to economic development, so and COVID-19. So it's a broad range. So I did speak with people that knew the community, and I would say I had no real direct mentors like a lot of young people I hear today. They have a couple of people that are, ushering them, up the ladder, so to speak. And because I entered, this political arena in this capacity, later in my career, but I did have many friends that were willing to help. Again, Chapman, my partner, who's involved in politics since whenever, we can go back to JFK. Of course, he was at a much higher level, so it was a little different, trying to explain local, I'm not doing local politics and he's doing national, but, it still had that experience. But I also relied on some of my prior experience in politics because I had done so much within the political arena. I just had never been, up front and center with a spotlight on me. But I think, just as Hillary and Jenn mentioned, and even you, Carrie, there are women in our lives that have made an impression on us. My mother, my grandmothers, I remember Shirley Chisholm, Barbara Jordan. I remember voting for Ms. Ferraro. I think the first time I voted was in '72. So there were a lot of people that I think gave bits and pieces of themselves to me to help me get to where I am today. And another woman that I have to acknowledge that after being on the board even for 4 years, that gave me advice was Liz Carter. And, she told me, just walk into a room and own it. So, there's people continue to give you bits and pieces of advice.
Well, and that's a great segue into what we wanted to kind of cover next. And I'm going to shoot this one to Hillary first. What advice would you have for young people who are looking at a career in public service today? Maybe what are some of the things that you wish you had known going in? I know you mentioned maybe not starting to run a couple of days before the the deadline, but talk to us about this.
So my advice for anyone looking to participate in public service is to be clear on your vision and your goals and to present them authentically to the community you hope to serve. Write them down and hold them close to your heart because the work will turn you in all sorts of unexpected directions. For example, pandemic. So the school board just passed a resolution on next steps for equity in education, which made Juneteenth a paid holiday and outlined steps the district will take to make sure we're centering the students in our district that are typically marginalized. We're also currently working on gender support guidelines to protect our LGBTQ students, but it has been a challenge to use so much time and energy on those issues when staff is working so diligently on mitigating the effects of the pandemic, standing up remote learning practices, working on plans for when we can reopen school buildings. And I have to literally imagine my feet planted on the earth while chaos swirls around me and look to my mentors like Jenn and Renee, who were leading similar work within the town and county to bring forward those initiatives, which were, part of my initial passion in running for the school board. I'd also recommend folks interested in public office create and define their support network and be really clear about it. Be clear who's willing to stand with you when things get tough. Talk through running for office with those folks before you do it, and imagine what you might need if you face public criticism or difficult decisions that will throw your personal life into public scrutiny. Set and protect your boundaries. I typically will respond to emails and calls 24/7, but as difficult decisions have been made about reopening schools, I've kind of had to create work hours for myself just to make sure that I'm intentionally taking time to recharge and spend time with my family. So in a nutshell, my advice would be to set clear goals, define boundaries and support network, and then protect those things pretty fiercely.
Sounds like good advice for anyone, whether they're running for office or not. So thank you for that. Renee, why don't you give us your advice?
Okay, well, similar to Hillary, I would say consider the arena that you're pursuing. Why are you doing it? And what are your expectations? And be careful of some of those preconceived notions. You may go in there thinking you're going to do one thing and something happens and, the focus is totally different and you've got to redirect. I, for example, thought I was headed into an arena of collaboration and teamwork. There's only a few of us on the board now. But, people come in there with their own agendas, egos, and sometimes there is some divisiveness, but you have to realize how, you have to work through that. And that means being confident in your own abilities and capabilities. Realize that, and I would say this, realize that women, we process information differently than men. And we approach situations differently in many cases, and we will be changing the decision-making paradigm to some degree. I'm not saying that we're going to do a total revolution, but things are going to have to change, and particularly as we continue to be in leadership positions and not just voting, kind of going along with the program. But I do think that we have to be confident in what we're bringing to the table. And something that I learned from a course that I took is that you bring your own weather. So however you step into the role, into the room, into the situation, you can help determine how it's going to flow and how it may turn out. Mentioning courses, I would say, seek courses and counseling on how to speak and how to get your point across. One of the challenges I've had as being female and being African-American is that, sometimes people don't want to they don't hear what I'm saying. So, and what if I say something, it seems as though it has to be validated by a white male. And confession, I did once, maybe twice now, I had to say, I just said that 5 minutes ago. When a colleague said it, I'm glad that you thought it was a good idea, but I did just say that 5 minutes ago. I have a friend right here in Orange County who helps people speak, men and women, but just the way that you present yourself and even how you introduce yourself, and it helps to build confidence. And even lowering your voice, instead of having a high squeaky voice, you kind of lower your voice, project your voice so you can get your point across. And then I would say finally that there are friends and colleagues nearby. Sisterhood is a powerful thing. And if we just reach out, we're there and we can come together and we can change the world.
Yes, we can. And I really like how you mentioned that women are changing the paradigm. They're changing kind of the way things are happening. And Jenn, that gives us a great opportunity to lob it over to you at this point. And then, what advice would you give? And maybe to follow up, have you experienced, being the first female mayor of Hillsborough, some of that change in paradigm that Renee was talking about?
Sorry, that last part threw me off. Now I'm going to think of something new. So pardon my, I'm a verbal processor also. It's totally fine. Well, first I want to follow up on something about the mentoring question that I feel very remiss for not saying. It was on my list, but I forgot to say it out loud, which is that Tom Stevens just taught me so much about what it's like to be the mayor and to be effective, and just how important that group facilitation piece is to making the whole thing work. People from the outside don't necessarily see that a lot if you're not, attending movies. No one's going to the movies anymore. Meetings, which are very much not like movies. so I'm just really, really grateful. I learned so much serving alongside him while he was mayor. And then he has also been very generous when I was running for mayor. And even still, in some ways, I tell him he's the luckiest man in Hillsborough for getting out when he did. But anyway, we're just really lucky to have him in our community. And I'm lucky to count him as a friend and mentor. So as far as how that might have changed since I've come on, I think it's very hard for me to give an informed answer to that, because things immediately changed so much with the pandemic. You know, we only had a handful of meetings before suddenly we went virtual, and that's just a different beast in and of itself. And so we'll see what happens. I'm sure that there's probably, that there's something there. I just can't articulate what it might be. And also because there's something different about when someone who has served alongside as a peer is then elevated to the person who, I mean, of course, we're all still peers, but who is leading the meeting. I think that that's just different. And that's a transition, that we've gone through. But I also want to say that the people that I serve with on the Board of Commissioners are just awesome people. And, one of the things I talk about a lot and, will make note of on social media is, kind of how patriarchy manifests in politics and circles of, how it affects women, the effect it had on, the debate last week, things like this. But I actually have had the fortune of serving alongside men who I can honestly say I've never had that issue either with our town manager or any of the people I've served with alongside the town board. Now, I've encountered that when I go to other meetings outside of Hillsborough. Yes, 100%. So that sometimes we're in our awesome little bubble here, imperfect as it may be, you discover how great it is when you go elsewhere. And then, translating any of that into advice, I would say that the why is really important, which I won't belabor that, but Hillary and Renee, I think we're right on target. Why you're running it, just knowing why you're running is really important. Staying grounded in what your own values are, and knowing that you cannot die on every single hill, but you should have a couple of hills that you're willing to die on. Because I think that if any person in elected office is not willing to, stake their seat on something, then why are, that to me gets to the why. Why are you even there? There should be some things we're ready to get booted out of office for. And also, this is so important for local elections. I want to emphasize that this is, I don't want to say anybody can do it because I think that people should, be paying attention to what's going on. But I think that sometimes people are held back from running for local office because they think that they need to have some particular special knowledge, understand exactly how everything works. And so they just think, well, I don't know that stuff. And the people who are doing that must know that stuff. And that just isn't true. If you've got a good head on your shoulders and you care about your community, then you're going to be fine, because there are people who will show you, the mechanics of how anything works. Is it like drinking from a fire hose when you get in there? Absolutely. But you figure it out. And that shouldn't be the thing that holds anyone back.
That is fantastic. And I can imagine there are a lot of folks who do feel that way. And it's great to hear from someone in the trenches that, you can go out and do it even without having a political science degree or anything else like that. So thank you for sharing that. And this is kind of the last question I have before I want to open it up. We've got a few questions in the Q&A that we want to get to, but for many of us women, having the right to vote is something that is a given. And we kind of forget that we have only had that right for 100 years. And for looking at how it was like for women of color, that was an even longer struggle. Even though they legally had the right to vote, there were so many impediments put in place. And so I was thinking about this for myself, and I'd love to know for you guys, do you remember the first time you voted? And when you did that, were you aware of the significance and of the, how important that action was, considering the fight to get that right? And I think we'll start out with Renee, and then we'll go to Hillary and then Jenn. And I'm pointing at you guys on the screen. Sorry about that.
Thank you. So yeah, I was talking about this last night with Michael. When did I first vote? And I remember it wasn't, they had finally changed the age to 18 because it had been 21, but because we were in the midst of the Vietnam War. And, our young men and women were going overseas at age 18, and they finally changed the age to 18. So I voted in 1972. That was the first time. But bear in mind that I had gone to an all-girls school, high school. Thank you, Dad. And I can remember so they were, in one sense, they were grounding us to be, I suppose, I don't know. I was kind of an oddball, to be good housewives, to some, well-to-do attorney or something, I don't know. But we were also taught to be independent women, independent thinking. And I can remember my grade, we had to do forms every year. And my grade decided to do a form on the natural superiority of women. So we were all, yeah, we were all ready. And consider the times. The ERA movement, now women's lib, that was all coming into vogue. And not only that, I'm from the city of Susan B. Anthony and Frederick Douglass. So, they're like looming all the time overhead. And as I had mentioned before, my mother, who had been, she had her own business, and then my grandmothers, and a whole host of strong women who raised me, strong Black women at that. Being in the North, of course, the right to vote was, I'm sure, it was challenged, but not to the extent that it was here in the South. And mind you, when I first voted in 72, they had just signed the Voting Rights Act, in 65. And there were still many challenges, just as there are today. I will tell you, even today. At the last election, I had people watching me. And I'm on the ballot, and they're taking pictures of me and watching me to see what I'm doing, making sure I'm not making the wrong step. So it has been a challenge, but and I knew it was a challenge, and even for people of color across the board, because I can remember even being in school when they asked us, when I was in fourth, I don't know if it was fourth or sixth grade, and they asked us to do, who do we think should be, on the cover of Time magazine, and my father told me to write about Thurgood Marshall. And of course the teacher said, oh, well, because I was at an all-white school at this point. And I said, well, that's a nice idea, you can write about it, but I don't think that's going to happen. Of course, it did happen about a couple of years later. But it's just that whole notion that, nice idea for people of color, for African Americans to, excel, but it's a nice idea, but it's not there yet. So and even when I helped a friend of mine get elected to the state assembly in I think it was like 1983, that was a challenge because he was the second African American from the western part of New York. The others had come from New York City that were in the state assembly. So, all along I've realized, what, I can't help it but understand, what the landscape is here in America and how important it is for all of us to have the right to vote and to exercise that right to vote. So I'm done with my soapbox.
Well, you did a lovely job on your soapbox, and I agree with you wholeheartedly. And Hillary, can you respond to that as far as your first experience?
Sure. So the first time I was eligible to vote in a presidential election, which was the first time I chose to vote, was the Bush-Kerry race of 2004. I was in college at Appalachian State at the time, and I don't really remember anything about the moments I filled out the bubble or like walking in to vote. I don't think that I thought about the personal significance of the moment then, but what does stand out in my memory about that time was that at least the students in the Democratic Party in Boone felt that there was a very concerted effort to suppress the votes in Boone at the time of students. So it's a very conservative town and a very liberal university. And I can't remember all of the details, and I don't want to like misrepresent what was going on, but I think that the way that they were scheduling, anyway, I was really left with the impression that democracy was a sport that you have to participate in, and that if, you know, inaction was a political action in and of itself, because if you just go along with what's happening, you know, you're just going to get swept along. And so I would say, even though it was my first time voting, it definitely was significant in that way.
What an experience. Wow. Jenn, how about you?
So the first election that I would have voted in was 1991. I turned 18 in October of 1991. And so that would have just been a municipal election that I can't remember a single thing about. But then 92 was a presidential year. And I was living in Colorado at the time, taking a gap year. And it was, I honestly don't remember if I registered to vote in Colorado or if I voted absentee in North Carolina. What I mostly remember is that having grown up and suffering some heartbreaking losses in big races that my mom in particular and my family was working on, is that I voted for a candidate who won. And so that was really, really exciting. It's a good feeling to vote for candidates who win. But it just, you know, super nerd about voting. I just really enjoy it. And I'm one of those people who it took me a while to warm up to the idea of early voting, because I wanted to vote on election day. You know, that's my ritual. That's the thing. I like to take the kids with me, but I've seen the light, and I think that early voting is an absolutely wonderful thing. So I've turned into an early voter, but it's always something that, you know, I have this very sentimental, idealistic view about, is that this really does matter. Electoral politics is not everything. It does not fix the world, but it does have a really important impact on people's lives.
Absolutely. Well, this has all been so interesting, and I want to get to, we've got some great questions going on in our Q&A. So just so that everyone on the call is aware, one of the questions was, as someone who wants to be more involved locally, sometimes I don't even know where to go to find information on events, and where should I start? And Renee, I know you were able to answer some of that, but can you verbalize that for the recording so that people watching this later will know as well?
Yes, I wish I had the website lodged in my head, but you can go to the Orange County website, and there is a page on advisory boards where it lists where there are openings on our advisory boards. We also have a community relations department now. And if you sign up, I believe if you sign up for the Sunshine List, you can get announcements about openings on advisory boards, the weekly newsletter that talks about events that are happening all over Orange County, as well as in Hillsborough, Chapel Harbor. And but we definitely would love to have some folks on some of our advisory boards. I would say look through them. This is, you know, the advice from Jenn and Hillary. You know, when you get ready to run for office, consider, you know, what is it that you want to do, and look at the descriptions. You can even attend the meetings. You do have to show up at a meeting. Most of, you know, they're all Zoom meetings. But make sure it's something that, you know, that they're talking about things that you want, that you're interested in, and then fill out the application. And it's all right to call me. I mean, a lot of times people call and ask or tell me, hey, I just signed up for such and such a board. I said, okay, I'll be looking out for it, So do that. Yeah, we loved, I'm a big advocate of community involvement and community empowerment. So please do that.
Great. Jenn, do you have any follow-up on that from the town perspective? Is it the same kind of advice?
Same kind of advice. Just be sure you're getting the information in whatever way is the most likely that you're going to see it and read it. And we also are always looking for folks for our advisory boards. That's a great way to get to know the town. We also do Citizens Academy. I'm hesitating because we're thinking about renaming it, but where you can learn about town government. So there's always ways to get involved. And also, like, people in Hillsborough are super friendly, and both staff and your board members, reach out to us. We're always happy to help people. It's another great thing about small town politics is everyone's pretty accessible.
And I forgot to mention that we have an academy as well, probably modeled after yours, but of course it's not happening right now. But we've had several sessions already, several graduates. And I must say that even the Department on Aging, they have something called Project Engage. So for people that have retired, but don't really want to retire, I think it's like a 6-week course. And I mean, they really do a lot. And a couple organizations or groups have formed as a result of that, but it's a really good way to for people from Hillsborough to meet people from Carrboro and to learn about the county together. And they've even taken bus rides together to see, what the county is all about. So there are various ways to get involved.
That's great. And Hillary, are there ways and I am showing a bit of my misunderstanding somewhat of how things interact, but are there ways that there are ways to get involved with the school board as well?
So, yeah, I mean, there's all kinds of ways to interact with the school board. There are, at the school level, there are so many ways to get involved with the schools, which is really sort of the same idea. I mean, my cell phone number is on the Orange County Schools website. I hope that I'm very accessible to folks. So if there's some specific question, I'm more than happy to answer that. Email or call. I think also just generally getting involved in Hillsborough, if you've been to an event or someone who has hosted an event or helped with an event, just reaching out and touching base with those folks, because a lot of people in the community are involved in a lot of different ways. So, just find someone who is active and start picking their brains. And even if they don't know exactly what you're looking for, I bet they'll know who to point you to.
That's great. So we've got a great question here that I'm excited to hear answers from you guys on. What can we do to make sure that everyone votes in every election, especially women? So you guys can jump in. Who would like to respond to that?
Look, I'll just give some. Oh, go ahead. So I'll just give some, anecdotal advice. I mean, I think if we all are responsible for our own, it will go a long way. So make sure your family's voting, make sure your kids are voting, offer to babysit, take dinner, whatever you can do to help make their life easier and open up time. I mean, I know that in positions of power, we can offer employees time to go vote, things like that. But just doing whatever is within your own circle and power to help folks. If we all did that, it would make it a lot easier.
Mm-hmm.
Again, I agree. It's important to go ahead and vote and set the example. And I do think, I mean, I am really, yeah, I'm kind of on a back burner when it comes to Facebook and things like that, but I know it works. Social media, Twitter, what is it? All those things, Snapchat, whatever they are. If people know that you're doing it, that sets the example and says, well, maybe I should do it too, or I should. So I would say use all the methods. I mean, some groups are sending postcards to other women, telling that, either a line of encouragement. Other times we've sent letters or we've called people up to give personal stories. You know, you have to come from the heart so that people understand the importance of voting. And but let it be known, because I think each of us individually sets the perfect example. And take a friend, you know, if you're going to go vote. I mean, of course, now in this pandemic, it's kind of difficult, but you can say, I will meet you 6 feet apart at the poll or whatever it may be, but make fun of it. I mean, I've seen a lot of people bring their children, and I think that the children are more excited about it than the parents at sometimes, you know, and they know they're going to go in and get a sticker or something. And, you know, you start early. But I think that perhaps one of the biggest excuses that I hear is like, what's in it for me? Why should I vote? And that's where I think we need to come up with our own personal story as to why you need to vote. For example, you know, if you, whichever side of the fence you're on abortion, if that's important to you, then you go vote. You know, so people understand where those decisions are made. If you're concerned about, like in my case, a road coming in next to your house, if you want a 4-lane bridge next to your house, or if you don't, maybe you should go vote. Or if it's about schools, you know, and someone that she's a legend in this in Orange County, Mariah McPherson is very well known for saying, you know, if someone came to her with a complaint, the first thing out of her mouth was, "Did you vote?" So if you want to really have a say and try to make some changes, you really need to vote, even if you think it's not going to matter. Every vote does count. And I can tell you from my first election, it was 83 votes. That's how Earl got me, 83 votes. Of course, we're good friends now. It's no big deal. But every vote counts. And when there's an issue that comes forward, you should know whether or not, even if you lose, as Jenn said, there may be some battles that you may lose, but the fight's not over. But you've got to get in there and express yourself, and this is one way to express yourself. And too many people have bled and died to just throw that right to vote, you know, to the wayside.
Absolutely. Jenn, do you have anything you want to add to that?
The only thing that I'll add is that I think that there is a lot of work that could be done in organizing outside of elections. You know, I have been watching what's happening over in Alamance. There's an organization called Down Home, and I am finding it, you know, I'm watching it from the outside, but it's an incredible just organizing effort across race and across class that I think that Orange County could use more of. It's a way of finding solidarity across different groups that that then makes people really see that they have a stake in each other as well as their local government, and that all those things are bound together. And I would love to see more of that here locally. I also would say that I think that I know it's different for school board because y'all don't have the same kind of advisory board system, but Hillsborough town government, I think probably Orange County too, all of us have been doing a lot of self-reflection over the past several years about who is involved on our advisory boards, who shows up to meetings, and really trying to think more creatively about community engagement and finding authentic community engagement in groups in our community that are disenfranchised in one way or another. And trying to center those voices and experiences in a way that we have not done a great job of in the past. And so we have a lot to learn there and are, you know, trying to put it more to practice. But I think that will pay off in the future. If we're successful, we'll have dividends on who's getting involved in the process.
Great. And speaking of how we get information in elections, one of the questions that we're getting is, as someone who supports ranked choice voting, I'm curious to hear the panelists' thoughts on either ranked choice voting generally, or if they think it's something that might be a good fit for Hillsborough. If you want to find more information on that, there's a website called fairvote.org that you can go to. And I guess we can who, is there anyone that would like to take that? Would you all like to respond?
I'll just take a real brief stab at it to say that I think that ranked choice voting is awesome. I would love to see that employed more generally as in the electoral process. I think that for that to work, that it would not work well in Hillsborough now, because we do not have enough people voting in our local elections to, in fact, we frequently don't even have contested elections, which, though it's easy when you don't have one, I think that we lose something when that happens as far as the public discourse. So I think for that to work, we just need to lay some groundwork of greater involvement in our municipal elections, especially.
And I would say the same thing for the county. That has been brought up at the county level. We're actually looking at how we elect our county commissioners now, and there will be a task force set up in December, January, to get representation. I think the challenge, though, is the way that the way the population is dispersed around the county and the different populations, and how do we actually achieve the goal of ranked choice voting given the demographics and how we're laid out. But I mean, it's worth exploration.
Great. Lastly, we have one last question in the chat, and Jenn, this one is specifically to you. Your style is different from Tom Stevens, and the participants curious to know what kind of response you get to having that different style.
This is a fun question. For starters, it really harkens back to just me needing to stay grounded in my own, which is, a conversation that I had, internally before I first ran for office, is thinking I can only do this if I feel like I can be myself and not try to be someone I am not. And so that has served me well over the years, and especially now because our styles are different. And also he was much beloved. He was mayor for a very long time. He was a very effective mayor. And so I know that our community has this feeling of, well, that's what a mayor is. In fact, I'll tell a very quick funny story. Is when I was running during the campaign for mayor, I was in an event. Tom was also at this event. And I met someone for the first time who said, I just really think that Tom Stevens is just great. I wasn't sure about him when he first ran, but then I got to know him and I think he's done a great job. And look at him. He just looks like a mayor. And Tom and I were both wearing the same outfit. We were both wearing a blazer, a t-shirt, and jeans, and I'm like, we're in this, Anyway, so what I try to do is just use Tom's example in the ways that he was effective, but not try to be Tom. And I'm not really answering what kind of response do you get. And I think it just varies from person to person. I know that for some people it's not quite settled, and that's okay. I just have to be okay with who I am.
Right. And you've all mentioned that. I love that connection that you've all said too. You have to know who you are and what is important and what you're willing to stand for and move forward with. And I am inspired by all three of you. I just want to thank you so much for joining us today, for being part of this panel, for sharing your stories, and for serving our community. You're serving each of us at a very important level, and I hope you know how appreciated that is. I also just want to thank the audience for joining us today, and I need to give a shout out. This is probably our last program for the Year of the Woman, the She Changed the World, and I just need to say, her name was mentioned earlier. There are three ladies. She's one of them who were instrumental in getting all of these programs up and running from the Burwell School. Janie Morris, Jan Irwin, and Betty Eidner. These ladies worked tirelessly for over a year and a half to develop these programs. And then the pandemic came and they didn't stop. They figured out a way to keep it going, and they gave us the opportunity to have this wonderful conversation today. And so I just want to give a shout out to them. And If you're interested in coming to more of our, yes, we must do that. If you're interested in coming to more of our programs, please go to our website, burwellschool.org. Follow us on social media if you like it. Some of us do and some of us don't. But also, big thing, please don't forget to vote. This is a very important year. So thank you for joining us, and panelists, have a great rest of your day.
Well, thank you so much. And again, thanks to the audience.
Yes, thank
Yeah,
you.
it was a
Thanks
great
for having
job,
us.
Carrie.
Thanks, everyone.
When you're ready to run, just let us know.
That's right.
Bye, everyone.
Have a
Thank
Bye.
great
you.
year, everyone.
Good to see
Bye.
you, Renee and Hillary, too.
Yeah, take care. Enjoy the rest of your weekend.
Bye.